Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent. Today I'm going to be doing an episode 0 for Dream Eaters. I don't usually do these anymore, but since Dream Eaters has so many different decks and I'm actually testing something similar in both of them, I would like to talk about my plans for the decks before I get into it. So on both sides, I'm testing something fairly similar. On Dream side, I have Daryl as my Clover, and then for my fighter, I'm going to be using a Leo Anderson build. Then paralleling that, on web side, I'm going to have Stella as my Clover and Tommy as my fighter. Both sides have not particularly impressive Guardians as their fighters. Both sides have very impressive Survivor Cloovers, and I'm testing a lot of things I've never quite seen before. With Daryl, I've played the difficulty 0 Daryl before. Shadowlight is a little bit at odds with the research notes though, since this isn't an investigation. Likewise, if you want to run all the clue dropping stuff, the deck gets really tight and you can't really fit the difficulty 0 stuff anyway. The Daryl I saw before was the super tempo-oriented difficulty 0 Daryl. I've also seen Clue Dropper before in Daisy, and both of those decks are really, really strong. And I'm interested in seeing how it performs in Daryl. After all, it was printed alongside and ostensibly for him. I'm cautiously optimistic that since Maelson is as broken as he is, that this might actually be a stronger version of Daryl. I know that I'm going to be a weaker clue finder than the tempo Daryl. I'm still going to be very, very good at it. Daryl's got 5 book. In the early game, I can still afford to run Shadowlight to help me in those early scenarios before I have all the clue dropping stuff. This Daryl is going to be perfectly fine for clue finding. It's not going to be crushing the game like a Rex would, but it'll still be like one of those high tier seekers just obliterating the clue finding game all the same. And then instead of crushing it to the degree that the other Daryl does, this leans more into team support with William T. Maelson, and it leans more into team support with Lucky level 3 as well. I think this deck is really, really strong, and it might actually be the best version of Daryl, or it might just be a little bit weaker than Tempo Daryl. I'm interested in finding out. Coming over to Stella, I'm interested in seeing her difficulty 0 build, because since she's the only person who previously really wanted to run Quick Learner in the first place, it makes Shadowlight fit naturally into her more than it does any survivor other than Daryl. Outside of that, it's basically just a difficulty 0 build as you'd expect it to be. I have as many clue finding tools as you can possibly cram into a deck. I'm running Dark Horse Mariner's Compass as well. And this is mostly just a holdover from the level 0 deck. At level 0, Stella's just a little bit rough. It's hard to make the deck work. And as a consequence, I've just put every single trick I have available in the class into her deck. Because in the early scenarios, you just have to figure out how to get clues. And the easiest way to handle the economy of all these events is to simply go on your own. I'm not convinced it's the best way to build Stella, but it's certainly an easy answer to True Survivor costing 3 and Shadowlight costing 2, and then Live and Learn and, Lucky and winging it on top of that, and look what I found. There's just so many expensive Survivor events that on your own seems like a perfect answer to them. I'm not convinced it's right, but it's certainly intuitive, and I'm looking forward to trying out this version of Stella. I know late game she's going to be a monster. The question is really just how well does she do in the early scenarios, because she does have 14 experience of permanents that are really important to her. Coming over to my fighter for the Dream side, Leo. This is a really basic Leo deck. You run Flamethrower, you run Brandigathuga, you have some allies that are Leo and the fight allies, nothing else. It's really, really standard Leo. However, specifically the reason I want to run Leo is so that I can adaptable in on the hunt for the finale of Dreamside. If you know, you know. If you don't, buckle up, it's going to be amazing when you see it. But aside from really wanting to test that, Leo's a character where I just needed to see him again in the early game, because I can't remember what it looks like. I know that late game Leo shooting a Flamethrower 4 times in 1 turn is a monster. I know that he's got better draw than other Guardians because of Easy Mark. I know that he's got better action economy because of Leo. I know he's got more experience from Kieran Zobel. There's a lot going well for Leo. The 1 foot sucks, it really does. Maybe this deck should have, like a You Handle This Win or a Savant. Definitely better cards to be running than On the Hunt, for instance. But I really just want to see how he does in the early game and how this counter tech works and where the gods dwell. I'm really looking forward to both of those things. And as a consequence, this is actually the deck I'm more interested in. It's the level 0 deck. And you can see I'm running Breach the Door. Again, probably just typically better as You Handle This, but Breach the Door works really well to enable Shadowlight on pretty much any location. Breach the Door is a card that definitely has a home that I initially didn't really consider, which is not that it's just good because it gives fighters a way to help with clues. It does. It's not great, but it does do that. The big thing Breach the Door does is it turns on difficulty 0, which is a huge deal. The moment you have a survivor in your team, at all, Breach the Door starts being a card you consider. There can be really jank builds now, like Flex Yorick, relying on Breach the Door and Lantern and Quick Learner to try to get Shadowlight to go off and then recur it over and over again. That's something I'm interested in trying in the future, but for now, I just want to know, hey, Leo, how do you do early game? And normally this would be a machete somewhere, right? But we're in Dream Eater, so you can't run machete. That's a trap. And lastly, we have the Tommy deck. This is really just like trying the upgrade path where you go beat cops first, followed by stand-togethers, and you see if just beat cop with a load of draw getting recurred is good enough to fight with. And later in the deck, we're going to stick to the plan into flamethrowers. We're going to get Branded Gathaga relatively early because it's a great weapon. And the early game deck is again what I'm interested in. How does this Tommy do at level 0? When I first upgrade beat comps or second upgrade stand-togethers, how's the deck doing? I expect to say what I've always said about Tommy. It's perfectly sufficient but utterly unimpressive. That's how I feel about both of these lists. And also, this short supply shouldn't be here. I'm going to give you a quick heads up. This short supply isn't there because you'll notice the View Next Deck button has been available this whole time. I'm recording this after Dream Eaters. I've already run it. The reason those decks all had super precise numbers of experience is because those decks were actually the decks I finished the campaign with. Normally, I would record this before Dream Eaters. In fact, I did, but I didn't edit it until after Dream Eaters. And then I realized that my mic wasn't recording and I lost 2 videos for some reason. So I'm re-recording this after Dream Eaters, thus the incredible specifics of like this deck. I won't be going over all the middling steps. I won't be saying exactly how they performed. I did just want to recap how all of them worked. I'm interested in seeing this sort of level 0 build in both Tommy and Leo, getting a reminder of how those characters perform. The final upgrades, like they're getting flamethrowers and stick to the flame, they're turning into normal characters at that point. I know they'll be strong then. That's not the question I have with them. I don't need to test that. I know that this Leo is a juggernaut. I'm curious about this Leo. And then I just want to see, how does Stella do in the early game? I know Stella's great, but I've been wondering, is she really S tier? Isn't her early decks, like, isn't this 2-in book as a main Clover a serious problem? And I will say that of all the S tier characters, I think Stella has the weakest start, but I don't know if Stella's start is so weak that she gets knocked out of S tier like Daisy does. And for the record, Daisy, this is off topic entirely, Daisy can build tempo decks that are like competitive with early S tier decks, but they aren't broken in any way. The problem is that the broken thing Daisy does, Clue Dropper Daisy, can't really transition smoothly from Tempo Daisy, and you have a real jank period where either you never get to S tier because you're Tempo Daisy, or your early game is weak because you're Clue Dropper Daisy. And that's what keeps her out, and I'm wondering, maybe Stella's early game is weak enough that she doesn't get to S tier. Don't know yet. Well, actually, now I do, but I don't want to spoil things. And then with Daryl, which is like, he's broken. I can't imagine making a Daryl that's not S tier. But I am curious, is this build better or worse than the other Daryl I've seen? And honestly, Maelson is like so gross that if a character can easily run Maelson and justify it, it's probably the right thing to do. I think Maelson deserves a taboo to like 4 experience. I'm not gonna, maybe just make him cost money, I don't know. Thinking on it, I think the taboo Maelson needs is probably that instead of canceling and discarding the other, he cancels and shuffles the other back into the encounter deck. Because then you can't avoid dealing with cards with Maelson. You can absolutely mitigate the encounter phase, but you can't remove elite enemies from the game with him. Because that is what he does. You should never have to deal with elite enemies, or if your fighter is exceptional, you should never have to deal with ancient evils, or whatever the card you're afraid of is, right? Maelson's disgusting. Anyways, I feel I'm beginning to ramble off topic, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll be rather incoherent. Hope you enjoyed this brief summary of the decks I'll be playing and Dream Eaters and what I'm looking to test. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.